Hello, and most welcome to 820 of the Heidegger series. We are burning the midnight oil. We will do another lecture of the Honorable Warren Goldfarb, Wittgenstein on Fixity of Meaning. Last time we looked at how Wittgenstein is showing that rationality, the power of abstraction, analysis is not the search for an ultimate particle or a generality derived from the very same particle or least important atomic meaning. And also that there are no sharp concepts. The best abstract concepts, the best abstract thinking is incredibly blurry. Even more so, I would say, than words that, for instance, refer to lamp or a squirrel. Fractality shows that abstraction can only come with blurriness, with the edged. Only that can bring about understanding, learning, knowledge, development. You can always make a spin here on the matter with things. Ian McGilchrist's latest book, latest I say, I don't hope poor old McGilchrist needs to write another book. I think a couple of thousands of pages are quite enough. But we know today intellectual life has disappeared. The left hemisphere is unable to do abstractions. For the left hemisphere, all is sharp borders, sort of, if you like, mechanical rules, a rule-driven thinking that is decided from the beginning with a priori classical laws. That deterministically determines meaning. We know that that doesn't give meaning, and that depression is incredibly common among academia today. I think there are two aspects there. The one looking for higher education today are very different from the ones, let's say, 100 and 150 years ago. There is very little gain to be had. It's regurgitating of parasitic expressions. And the mechanized rationality doesn't give a yield. In the other article, we mentioned Epicureanism and the locus aminus, or the locus sanctus. We also mention ataraxia, peace of mind. Those things are absolutely absent from education today. It's a new sort of attenuated non-interested knowledge and non-absorbent knowledge that doesn't take anything, neither for the inner nor for the outer. Instead, we have these very sharp, nasty divisions. Yes, they have a nastiness to them. The sharpness is in itself a sort of aggressive act. Very well depicted by Edward de Bono in his seminal book, I Am Right, You Are Wrong, where he depicts very aptly this rigid, fixed sense of reality and understanding. Where knowing are small bits, atomic bits that you can collect. A friend of mine, he decided to get knowledgeable. He was already a doctor in some obscure subject, but he wants to get even more knowledgeable. So he decided to learn the encyclopedia by heart. I think that view is shared by, let's say, 90% of academia today. But it's also shared by ChatGPT, AI. This is something that can already be done by an artificial intelligence like ChatGPT. Just the other day, my professor said, that's the absolute top of understanding. And it's already here, he said, amazed over ChatGPT. Because, as he saw it, it contains everything, every dictionary in the world, not just one. So it's not rule following, it's not ready-made rules, fabricated in advance and subjectively assumed by the person who, so to speak, has or have the knowledge. And I continue my read. The conception of a level underlying the use of general terms, which satisfies the demand for fixity, requires an absolute notion of determination. For what lies at that level is conceived as comprehending everything relevant to each individual case of ascription or denial of the term. It is meant to explain, or at least to encompass our practices fully. Hence, it cannot presuppose any practices, any knowing how something is to be taken. Wittgenstein's argument is meant to show that we have no model for that sort of determination. I do not think it correct to describe the argument as showing outright that such a notion of determination is incoherent. Rather, our coming to use the notion in the conception shows a confusion. For we wish to imagine the underlying level on the model of external standards, like samples or signposts. But at the same time, the demand for fixity forces us to avoid presupposing just those surroundings, those practices that make the standards into standards. This contrast is also exhibited in Wittgenstein's discussion of explaining and knowing the meaning of game. An explanation of the term, plausibly enough, would use examples of games. Its success is a matter of getting the learner to employ those examples in a certain way. On the conception of the underlying level, this has to be a matter of the learner surmising something that the explainer, in principle, cannot explicitly formulate. Then what is surmised is what determines in an absolute way that the learner will employ the examples in the right way. The family nature of games by itself makes this picture look strained. The argument above about the need for practices undercuts it further. Again, Wittgenstein emphasizes that we have no model for what would have to occur given the conception. Here, giving example is not an indirect means of explaining. In default of a better. Or any general definition can be misunderstood too. The difficulties in the conception arise from the notion that the underlying level must be self-sufficient. And so must prescind from reliance on our practices. We can take this in one go, no need to move until further down. In contrast, Wittgenstein asks, isn't my knowledge, my concept of game, completely expressed in the explanations that I could give? That is, in my describing examples of various kinds of game, showing how all sorts of other games can be constructed on the analogy of these. Saying that I should scarcely include this or this among games, and so on. Wittgenstein does mean completely expressed. But then the reliance on us and our practices is obvious. For it is only given facts about us that anyone who understands my explanations will take the examples in a particular way. That anyone who uses the same explanations as I do, in fact, will have the same concept of game. That knowledge of the meaning of game can be claimed to be fully contained in those explanations. Of course, those explanations do not logically yield just my concept of game. They do not ensure that my knowledge extends in the standard way to new cases. The demand for fixity of meaning stems from the desire for something to give just this assurance. In the absence of any reliance on facts of our common experience, Wittgenstein is concerned to point out that the search for such a thing is a search for a phantasm. Any general definition can be misunderstood, but also that there is no need to embark on this search. Wittgenstein makes a similar point in remarks on the foundations of mathematics. I can train someone in a uniform activity, for instance, in drawing a line like this with a pencil on paper. Now I ask myself, what is it that I want him to do then? The answer is always to go on as I have shown him. And what do I really mean by is always to go on in that way. The best answer to this that I can give myself is an example like the one I have just given. I would use this example to show him, but also to show myself what I mean by uniform. We talk and act. That is already presupposed in everything that I'm saying. Cora Diamond gives a helpful gloss on this passage. If I need to explain something to another person, it is true that certain possibilities may need to be ruled out. But the idea of a philosophical account of what I really mean by he is always to go on in that way is of an account addressed to someone whose uptake, on whose responses we are not at all depending. Wittgenstein is noting that the philosophical error is to take it that the specification of what I really mean picks it out, not as might be for another human being, but in a sense, absolutely from the possibilities. So far, I've been suggesting that Wittgenstein sees the demand for fixity of meaning as arising out of a vain attempt to avoid relying on facts about us and the way we normally operate. There's another sense in which it is only granted a reliance on normality, that the explanations we can give fully express our knowledge of the concept. What I have in mind here is a normality about the world. Just as agreement in those explanations will not ensure agreement in concept if normal human practices are not assumed. If, for example, some person acts like the wayward child of paragraph 185, who just doesn't get it about adding 2 to numbers larger than 1,000. so too those explanations will not ensure agreement if the world cannot be relied upon to act in its normal way. We may well agree on everything we would ordinarily say about a concept, and every way we could think to explain it. But if a truly bizarre and out of this world item were to come along, as a candidate for inclusion under the concept, we might well disagree. The philosophical desire to preclude this is another basis for the demand for fixity of meaning. Again, it's the idea that what is meant has to be picked out from all the possibilities. Not just the ones that actually from time to time arise. And here is an excellent point to put a break in this rather dense text. Just put a short pause, I need to get a drink. A second. So let's go for some quotes. But let me start with a hint here to give you a sort of pointer to where it's leading. So we are a smaller subgroup that are sharing, we are acting in the same ways. We are unaware of our same way actions. That is something we forget or we are not aware of. We are not aware of is the more correct phrase. But as Goldfarb and Wittgenstein show, we cannot rely upon it, and we are actually putting everything outside ourselves. And therein lies what seems to be a very small mistake. Someone could claim, hello, it all amounts to the same. Usually does, but it's a world of difference. And when the mistakes come, and they will come, they destroy everything. What Wittgenstein points to is that it is so incredibly, incredibly easy to fall for that. Especially today, when we grow up in a world where we even share music, dances all over the globe. You can imagine the communal way of acting to understand also has acquired a sort of communality. And then all of a sudden you think meaning stems from nowhere. We go to page 81, please, Kalle. Begins directly, already the first sentence I read. The conception of a level understanding underlying the use of general terms which satisfy the demand for fixity requires an absolute notion of determination. So we get this notion of a determination, and I would compare that to being tense, being fixed, being rigid, mentally, definitely bodily. It's a sort of fixation, but language, the world can never yield to that fixation. So what gives yield? And the last sentence in the same paragraph, we sort of, let me explain first, we sort of think that we can measure what is rational by signposts or meters or sticks. This is giving us a sort of incredibly fake sense of security. For we wish to imagine the underlying level on the model of external standards. Do you hear? External standards, like samples or signposts. But at the same time, the demand for fixity forces us to avoid presupposing just those surroundings, those practices that make the standards into standards. So what we do is we ignore how the meter came about, and we just see it as a sort of fixity. Were we to see that the meter had a sort of use to it, if the Higgs boson, to cite Paul Feyerabend in a broad sense, was man-made or made by instrument and man together, that would yield a fantastic understanding. But if we just say, oh, the Higgs boson exists, or the meter exists, it's a very short-sighted way of thinking. therein comes this idea of a fixity. It's a bit like I once upon a time thought I saw a hare under a hill, moving about, moving from left to right. It turned out to be a bald man. I was too quick. It's a bit similar here. You're too quick. The meter doesn't come from Alpha Centauri, or it has an origin, I would say, is much better to say. The last and fourth paragraph, 4 lines down. On the conception of the underlying level, this has to be a matter of the learner surmising something that the explainer, in principle, cannot explicitly formulate. So see here that we, by assuming everything should be formulated, with that very assumption, we start thinking that the explicit explanation for how something is, that is how it came into life. That is how it started. But the explicit formulation, as we know, it's a way to communicate something after the fact. After the thinking is done or the invention is made. Edvard de Bono pointed this out, that there is it's a whole world of difference between before and after. Before, we don't have rules, but after we need to have logic or language or explanations to communicate what we just invented or what we just came to understand, or a new invention or a new deepening of things. That needs to be explained, but that is not the way it came about from the beginning. So that is a mistake of order. So the first one is not seeing the whole thing or the background. And the second is not seeing it in the proper order. Just because you can explain how gasoline was discovered in the late 19th century, it doesn't mean that that explanation was how it was discovered. It most definitely doesn't mean that. It would be nonsensical. But the first mistake and the second mistake leads to a sort of enforced and strengthened possibility of falling into the misconception. When I start talking, I already assume that human beings are acting, behaving, having an attitude, so they can understand what I say. This is presupposed. And I would say that is the first mistake, not to acknowledge that. And even as a bit further down on page 82, Wittgenstein makes a similar point in remarks on the foundations of mathematics. And mathematics is one of those games, so to speak, where uniformity is assumed. But the only way to show uniformity at bottom is to do it, to actually perform. And as you see in the two last sentences, I would use this example to show him, but also to show myself what I mean by uniform. And listen now. We talk and act. That is already presupposed in everything that I'm saying. And I will not read the last site that I have, but it's, if you put something completely different into the context, like in Martian, those same words, those same mathematical formulas could possibly not be understood in the same way. It is because of the same reason, if a lion were to talk, we wouldn't be able to understand what it was saying, because its life world is so different. And that are three different presuppositions or mistakes that leads to fixity. Kalle Lundahl, please join.
Thank you. On the same page, that is 82. Here, the paragraph 75 from Philosophical Investigations. Isn't my knowledge, my concept of game, completely expressed in the explanations that I could give? So everything is about it. This is my explanations. That is the emphasis. My explanations, in contrast to general definitions. So Wittgenstein is against general definitions. Instead, it's about my explanations. That is the main point here. But I'm asking myself here, is not Wittgenstein coming here in paragraph 75 very close to fall into the trap of private language? Because it's about my explanations. Say I want to explain chess, or even suppose I'm Luther, I want to explain the meaning of the Bible. Is it not? Then what is there really the difference between this not having a general definition, but having my explanations of the Bible, or my explanation of how I understand chess?
Oh, yes, 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 I see what you mean.
So the
I
line
think,
seems to be very, very subtle. How do you explain it, Hans?
It's a bit late here, and I will do my best. I'll give it a try. Give a little different intonation of in the reading of this paragraph. Isn't my knowledge, instead of saying isn't my knowledge. Isn't my knowledge, my concept of game, completely expressed in the explanations that I could give. So what is this knowledge? It's actually, I think, the knowledge is of how the game works. And my knowledge, yes, it is still my, yes, but it doesn't press that it's absolutely my. See my as it could be on a different level. How much knowledge do I have? Not everyone has a perfect understanding of the game of Monopoly or a more complicated game. You need to know, and this is not an inner knowledge, it is not an outer knowledge, it is the way you move. So he's pointing to how well you understand the language game. Not so much pointing to my subjective expression of what I understand should be understood by others, because as you know, the private language game is indicating that is not a possibility. So if you play football, there will be a team of 11 players and the goalkeeper. That's correct, isn't it? Yes. And they will not always be to the same level of knowledge. Someone's like Zlatan, for instance, he'll be better, and someone else will be a bit less good. Somebody would be really bad at it. We're not equally good when it comes to communication. And that is based on your previous knowledge, your skills, your aptitude, who you are you smart, or is your body skilled, and so on. And that's another use of my, which is not that private. It's actually, everybody can see it. You see that slide is very good. So my guess is this is what he means.
Yes, okay. I think I get it, so to say. So the emphasis is on my knowledge. That is difference between who is actually teaching me the game. To use your example, Zlatan, if you most people could explain to me how soccer works, but Zlatan would give an extra value to it. He could give me some tricks.
Yeah.
Indeed, so it's my knowledge, so it's okay, you understand. So it's still the same game, it's still soccer, whoever teaches it.
Yeah, it's still soccer, still football, yeah.
So okay, so there is the difference between private language and say explaining a game that you don't know. Yes, absolutely, that makes sense. So my knowledge is my being, so there is difference, of course, in the teacher. We know that in real life. It's a difference in teacher.
Yeah,
absolutely. I like it very much. But let's say now, okay, so to go to the Luther's sola scriptura.
Could we just continue just 1 second more with
yes,
it?
Please.
But I think this is a very good pointer, as you say. But listen to this, isn't my knowledge, and especially the second one, my concept of the game. And when you read that, when Heidegger read that, or for instance, Chalmers, they did actually understand it that way, or more in that region. And I bet you there is a lot of people, probably the majority, because my concept does actually very easily can be understood as private language. Definitely.
Yes.
This is very, very typical how hard it is to understand Wittgenstein. If you read
and it shows that you need Hans as a Wittgenstein teacher.
Well, that would be a horrible, horrible thing to say. This is not what I'm implying. But I think in this case, I do have a point, and of course, I welcome everyone to comment this if you're not some other you. But I think very good that you brought up this. This is one of those paragraphs that extremely easy to go either way. And I would say going the other way is even more likely than going the Wittgensteinian way. Because concept, it's so connected to minus and how I understand the concept. Well, very good, Kalle. Okay, sorry for this.
No, okay, so I know you're tired, but let me continue on this track. So let's return to Luther's Sola Scriptura that we have discussed on many occasions.
Yeah.
Sola Scriptura. So let's imagine I am Luther. So I will explain the Bible. So it will be like Wittgenstein's speed in the box. So everybody, say we have many Luthers. They are all having the Beetle in the box, the Bible in the box, and everybody will probably give arrive at a different interpretation of a Bible verse.
Yeah.
How do they? That's if you give a Bible verse to people, they will arrive at different conclusions. And so it's still, let's say I'm Luther, I'm explaining a Bible verse to somebody. Of course, it's my knowledge, my understanding, but it's how could we put it? I don't know if Bible teaching is a game. It's a game, but it's
Yeah.
But it would be, I would be completely, I don't know, it's difficult to say.
Yeah, I do agree. It is, this text is extremely condensed, but it also has a very good purpose. I think it helps you to understand Wittgenstein, but it's a tough medicine.
Let's try to push it. So let's say I'm trying to explain the concept of a book or a Bible to a person who has never seen a book in his or her life. This could be a bushman, let's say in Australia or wherever. I don't want to insult somebody, but somebody who's never seen a Bible or book. And so I will try to explain the book or the Bible and perhaps a Bible verse. I think that they will get some understanding of it, but it will be very limited, of course. Like missionaries going to Africa and saying that so much God loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. So you would try to explain it to people who have never seen a Bible or heard about Jesus. But I don't know. It still be my knowledge, how much I have studied.
Oh yeah, I think I have an example. I think you remember this movie that I think you saw it about missionaries from Portugal, Jesuits.
With Robert De Niro?
No.
No.
But they went to Japan and
yes, indeed. Okay, I know.
And at the end of the movie, they realize this much more zealous Japanese people who sacrificed themselves had a completely different understanding of God, which was almost impossible to explain in words. But somebody gave it a try, and when the Jesuit padre understood, he got absolutely horrified. It's with Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson is the actor. That is a difference of life form, the same words, and it's an unusual thing. No, nothing is isolated in this planet. But this thing, of course, it's a fictional movie, probably never happened, but it looks very much like one of the examples here in this text from Wittgenstein. If it were to be Martian, the understanding would most probably be different, although the words could be the same.
Yes, I don't know. I could use the Bible as an object instead of usually like let's say a ball.
Oh yeah.
To you, that is a game, so
Yeah, well, it's a game, yeah, definitely a game. Needs to be played by players of the same team, wouldn't you say, Kalle?
yeah, yes, absolutely. You need a team, but you need also historical context. So
Oh yeah,
missionaries who go to Africa were never the missionaries themselves have perhaps limited historical knowledge about the biblical lands and so forth.
Yeah, I do agree.
So it's always my knowledge. There are no general definitions.
No.
Like this is the Bible.
No, indeed. I think maybe it could be a good time now to
Stop. Yes.
Yeah, it's thank you very much. I love this example you took forward, isn't my knowledge, because this is one of those duck rabbit texts of Wittgenstein. A lot of the paragraphs of Wittgenstein are like duck rabbits. They could be taken either way. But I do vote for my explanation to be more apt with what Wittgenstein is after. But please do comment if you're of some other view. Thanks, Kalle, and thank everyone for listening in. Have a very pleasant day, morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now, and